The morning bell at Bellefontaine Plantation rang at 4:30, same as every morning, and the boy was already awake. He'd learned years ago that being ready before the overseers came meant avoiding their boots, their shouts, their impatience. He pulled on his one shirt, too small now, the sleeve stopping inches above his wrists, and stepped out of the children's quarters into the pre-dawn dark. Around him, others stumbled from their cabins. 140 people lived on this plantation, 30 miles north of Baton Rouge, and every one of them moved to the rhythm of that bell. The boy took his place in the line forming near the equipment shed, waiting for work assignments. He knew where he'd be sent. He was always sent to the same tasks, but the ritual was required. Everyone had to be seen, counted, assigned. Matthias Crane stood on the shed steps with his ledger, calling out names and duties. He was the head overseer, a man who kept meticulous records and spoke with precision. The boy watched him carefully, as he watched everyone carefully. Crane's face never showed emotion, but his hands did, the way he gripped his pencil tighter when annoyed, the way he tapped the ledger when someone responded too slowly. Thomas, Crane called, though that wasn't really the boy's name. It was just what they called him when they bothered to call him anything. Most often, they said the mute or that boy or nothing at all, just pointed. Water duty. Fields 3 and 4, then the main house. The boy nodded and moved to collect the water buckets. 2 wooden pails on a yoke across his shoulders. He'd carry them so many times his body had adapted, one shoulder sitting slightly lower than the other. He was small for his age, which people guessed was somewhere between 10 and 12. No one knew exactly. His mother had died giving birth to him, and the midwife who might have recorded the date was long dead herself. He walked toward the distant fields as the sky began to lighten, turning from black to deep blue to the pale gray that meant sunrise was coming. Other workers moved past him toward different assignments: cotton pickers, cane cutters, equipment handlers, house servants. The plantation ran on sugar and cotton both, which meant twice the work, twice the overseers, twice the machinery that could maim or kill you if you got careless. The boy had learned the machinery's rhythms the same way he'd learned everything else, by watching. He couldn't ask questions. Couldn't say, "How does this work?" or "Why does it move that way?" So he observed. He studied the great grinding wheels of the sugar press, the way the cane stalks fed through and came out crushed and dry. He watched the cotton gin's teeth, how they separated fiber from seed. He memorized which sounds meant the equipment was running properly and which sounds meant danger, the grinding that preceded a jam, the squeal that preceded a break. In the fields, he moved between workers, offering water. They took the ladle, drank, handed it back. Some nodded thanks. Some didn't acknowledge him at all. He was used to both. Being mute had taught him that people responded to him in 2 ways. Either they treated him gently, as if he were fragile or simple-minded, or they treated him as if he weren't there at all, just another piece of equipment like the water buckets. Marcus was in Field 3, cutting cane. He was a tall man, maybe 30, with hands that had long ago scarred into thick calluses. When the boy offered him water, Marcus drank slowly, studying the boy's face. "You all right?" he asked quietly. The boy nodded. "You look tired. They working you too hard?" The boy made a gesture with his hands, a rolling motion that meant same as always. Marcus had learned to read some of the boy's gestures. Not all of them. The boy's system of communication was complex, built up over years, and most people didn't bother to learn it. But Marcus paid attention. He was one of the few who treated the boy as if he had a mind, not just as if he had a disability. "You still drawing pictures?" Marcus asked. The boy's face brightened. He nodded enthusiastically, then made a quick sketching motion with his finger in the air. "Good," Marcus said. "You got a gift. Don't lose it." He handed back the ladle and returned to work. The boy continued his rounds. By the time he'd finished the fields, the sun was fully up and the heat was building. August in Louisiana meant air so thick with humidity you could almost see it, heat that pressed down like a physical weight. He'd learned to move slowly in this weather, to conserve energy, to find shade where he could. His next assignment was the main house, which meant entering a different world. The Bellefontaine residence was a two-story structure with white columns and a wide porch, surrounded by gardens that enslaved workers maintained to look effortlessly beautiful. Inside, the air was cooler, high ceilings and cross-ventilation and the occasional breeze through tall windows. Pierre Bellefontaine had money, or at least he appeared to. The house was furnished with expensive things, paintings from Europe, furniture made from dark wood, carpets that had traveled by ship. The boy's job was to refresh the fireplaces, cleaning out yesterday's ash, laying new kindling and logs so they'd be ready if needed. In August, no one lit fires, but the work still had to be done. Routine maintenance, preparation for eventual cold weather, keeping everything ready. He entered through the kitchen door, where Aunt Bess ruled over pots and pans and the great brick oven. She was 60-something, grey-haired, and had somehow maintained authority even within slavery's crushing hierarchy. The white family deferred to her judgment about meals, and the enslaved workers respected her as someone who'd survived decades and accumulated wisdom. "There he is," she said when the boy entered. "You eat yet?" He shook his head. "Course not. Nobody feeds children proper around here." She handed him a piece of cornbread left from breakfast. "Eat that before you start. Can't work on empty." He ate quickly, grateful. Then he collected his ash bucket and small shovel and moved through the house's lower floor. The parlor first, then the dining room, then the library. Each fireplace had its own character. Some burned clean, some left more residue. He'd learned to judge how much wood and kindling each needed based on the size of the room, the quality of the chimney's drawer, the family's habits. The house was mostly empty at this hour. Pierre Bellefontaine was out inspecting the fields with the overseers. His wife had gone to visit a neighbor. Their 7-year-old son, William, was somewhere upstairs with his tutor. The boy worked quietly, invisibly, which was how he preferred it. He was in the study, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk, when he heard voices from the adjoining office. The door between the two rooms was slightly ajar, open just enough that sound carried through. The boy froze. He'd learned that survival often meant knowing things you weren't supposed to know, and that safety meant pretending you didn't know them. He continued working, hands moving automatically, while his attention focused on the voices. Pierre Bellefontaine's voice was easy to recognize, deep, with the accent of someone educated in the north but living in the south. "The debt comes due in December. I don't have the capital." A second voice, Matthias Crane, "The harvest should cover it." Should isn't will. And if the harvest fails, or prices drop, I lose everything. Bellefontaine sounded worried, which was unusual. The boy had rarely heard him sound anything but confident. Then a third voice, one the boy didn't recognize. "That's why you purchased the insurance policy. Double indemnity in case of accidental death. The payout would cover the debt and transfer property cleanly." The boy's hand slowed. He didn't understand all the words, insurance, indemnity, payout, but he understood the tone. This was secret conversation, important conversation. "Bellefontaine, my brother-in-law would inherit. He'd assume the debt, but the insurance payment would clear it." The stranger, "Precisely. Unless, of course, you were deceased before the note becomes callable. Then the insurance pays, the debt disappears, and your brother-in-law inherits an unencumbered property." A pause. Then Crane's voice, carefully neutral. "Accident happen. Especially during harvest season. Machinery, wagons, animals. Dangerous work." "I'd need documentation," the stranger said. "Proof of the arrangement. And my fee in advance, naturally." "How much?" Bellefontaine asked. 2,000. Half now, half when the policy pays." The boy heard papers rustling, then footsteps moving. He realized they might come into the study. He worked faster, dumping ash, laying kindling, trying to finish before the door opened fully. But they didn't come in. The conversation continued, quieter now. The boy caught fragments. Before December. Make it look natural. No questions asked. He finished the fireplace and moved toward the door, bucket in hand, ash smudged on his shirt. As he passed the office door, still ajar, he glanced inside for just a second. 3 men, Bellefontaine at his desk, Crane standing beside him, and the stranger in city clothes, black suit, leather satchel, the appearance of professional respectability. The stranger's face was thin, sharp-featured, with small spectacles perched on his nose. The boy looked away immediately and left the room. His heart was beating fast. He didn't know exactly what he'd overheard, but he knew it was dangerous. Dangerous to know, dangerous to have heard, dangerous to remember. But he would remember. He remembered everything. That was how his mind worked, without words, but with images, patterns, sequences. He saw things once and they stayed with him, detailed and complete. That evening, in the children's quarters, he sat on his sleeping pallet with his slate board. It was a small board, maybe 12 inches square, that had belonged to the plantation owner's wife before she died 2 years ago of yellow fever. She'd given it to the boy, along with pieces of chalk, because she'd noticed him drawing in the dirt and thought he might enjoy having proper materials. He drew what he'd seen, 3 men in the office, positioned as they'd been standing. Bellefontaine at the desk, Crane beside him, the stranger with his satchel. He drew the room's details, the bookshelf, the window, the map on the wall. Then he drew their faces, getting the proportions right, capturing the stranger's sharp features and spectacles. He didn't know why he drew it. He drew everything. It was compulsive, necessary, the way he processed the world. Without language, without the ability to talk through what he'd seen or ask questions about what it meant, drawing was how he thought. What you got there? James had wandered over. He was Aunt Bess's grandson, 14 years old, assigned to stable work. He looked at the slate. That Mr. Bellefontaine. The boy nodded. Who's that other man? The one in the fancy clothes. The boy shrugged. He didn't know. You draw good, James said. Like you seeing right into people. He lost interest and moved away. The boy studied his drawing. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. The men's positions? Their expressions? The satchel? He set the slate aside and lay down. Above him, through gaps in the cabin's roof, he could see stars. He thought about the conversation he'd overheard, tried to make sense of it. Debt. Insurance. Accidental death. December. He didn't understand it all, but he understood enough to feel uneasy. He'd learned to trust that feeling, the instinct that something was wrong, even when he couldn't explain why. Over the next 2 days, the boy noticed things. Small things. Changes in routine, moments that didn't quite fit the usual patterns. He saw Crane spending unusual amounts of time near the equipment sheds, examining the sugar press machinery, checking the heavy transport wagons. He saw Crane talking privately with Joseph Webb, the second overseer, a violent man who most workers tried to avoid. He saw Crane oiling mechanisms that shouldn't need oiling, making adjustments that didn't seem necessary. On the second day, the boy was carrying water past the main wagon storage area when he saw Crane at one of the largest wagons, a flatbed used for transporting cane loads and heavy equipment. Crane was underneath it, working on something. The boy slowed, pretending to adjust his bucket yoke while watching from the corner of his eye. Crane removed something from the wagon's brake mechanism. A metal piece, small enough to fit in his palm. He examined it, then slipped it into his pocket and slid out from under the wagon. The boy continued walking, but his mind was recording everything. The wagon, the brake, the removed piece, Crane's satisfied expression. That evening, he drew it. 3 slate boards now, arranged in sequence. The meeting in the office, Crane at the sugar press, Crane under the wagon. Marcus found him with the drawings. The quarters were communal, 20 people in this cabin alone, and privacy was impossible. Marcus knelt beside the boy's pallet, studying the slate boards. "What's all this?" Marcus asked quietly. The boy pointed to each drawing in sequence, trying to show, first this, then this, then this. Marcus frowned. "That's Mr. Crane." "Nod." "At the machinery." "Nod." "And at the wagon." Marcus looked closer. "What's he holding?" The boy made a gesture, pulling something from underneath, pocketing it. "He took something off the wagon." Marcus's voice got quieter. "From the brake." The boy nodded emphatically. Marcus sat back, thinking. He'd seen Crane at the machinery too, had wondered about it but hadn't wanted to draw attention by asking questions. Now, looking at the boy's drawings, seeing the sequence laid out, something clicked in his mind. "You overheard something, didn't you?" Marcus asked. "In the big house." The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Can't tell me what, can you?" Head shake. Marcus studied the drawings again. "This feels bad. This feels dangerous." He looked at the boy. "You need to hide these. Don't leave them where anyone can see." But the boy didn't hide them. He didn't fully understand the danger yet. To him, the drawings were just documentation, just his way of recording what he'd seen. He carried them with him the next day when he went to the main house for his fireplace duties. He left them in the study while he worked, slate boards propped against the wall, visible but not deliberately displayed. He was just setting them down, the way he might set down any of his belongings. William Belfountain, the 7-year-old son, found them during his playtime that afternoon. The boy was in another room when he heard William's voice. "Papa, look. The mute boy makes pictures." The boy's stomach dropped. He moved quickly back toward the study. Pierre Belfountain was there, examining the slate boards with his son. "These are quite detailed," he said, more to himself than to William. "I didn't know the boy had this skill." "That's you, Papa." William pointed at the first drawing. "And Mr. Crane." "So it is." Belfountain studied the image of the 3 men in the office, but his expression showed only mild interest, not recognition of the scene. The stranger in the drawing meant nothing to him out of context. He received many visitors, conducted much business. One man with a satchel looked much like another. He looked at the second drawing, Crane at the machinery, and the third, Crane at the wagon. "The boy seems fascinated by Mr. Crane," Belfountain observed. "Well, children fixate on things." He handed the slates back to William. "Give these to the boy when you see him. Tell him his drawings are very good." William found the boy in the hallway and returned the slates, proud to have delivered his father's message. "Papa says you draw good." The boy took the slates, managing a small smile for William, but inside he was uncertain. Had Belfountain understood what the drawing showed? Did he remember the meeting? That evening, Matthias Crane knocked on the door of Pierre Belfountain's study. "Sir, might I have a word?" "Of course, Matthias."
"Come in."
Crane entered, closing the door behind him. "Your son mentioned drawings. Pictures made by the mute boy." "Yes, quite skilled actually. Detailed little sketches of plantation life." "Might I see them?" William gave them back to the boy. "Why?" "Simple curiosity. The boy is peculiar. I like to understand what the workers are thinking, even the defective ones." Belfountain laughed. Thinking might be generous. The boy's mute, possibly simple-minded. I doubt there's much thought behind the drawings beyond mimicry. Perhaps. Still, I'd like to see them. For my records. Your records. Belfountain looked amused. You catalog everything, don't you, Matthias? Thoroughness prevents problems, sir. Very well. Retrieve them if you wish. Though I can't imagine what intelligence you'll derive from a mute child's sketches. Crane found the boy in the quarters that night. The sight of an overseer entering after dark made everyone tense. Such visits usually meant punishment or accusation. "You," Crane said, pointing at the boy. "Come outside." The boy stood and followed, his slate boards in his hands. Around him, people averted their eyes, not wanting to be associated with whatever trouble was coming. Outside, Crane gestured. "The drawings. Give them to me." The boy handed over the 3 slates. Crane held them near the lantern light, examining each one carefully. His face showed nothing, but the boy watched his hands. The knuckles whitened as Crane's grip tightened on the slates. "Where did you see this?" Crane asked, pointing to the first drawing, the 3 men in the office. The boy pointed toward the main house. "You were in Mr. Belfountain's study." "Nod. And you saw us meeting? You saw this man?" Crane pointed to the stranger. "Nod." Crane studied the second drawing, himself at the machinery. "You've been watching me work." It wasn't a question, so the boy didn't respond. The third drawing, the wagon, the brake, the removed piece. Crane stared at this longest. "Do you understand what you've drawn here?" Crane asked quietly. The boy didn't know how to answer that. He understood he'd drawn what he saw. Whether that meant understanding, really understanding, was different. Crane set down the slates and knelt to the boy's eye level. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it more frightening. "I'm going to explain something to you, and I want you to listen carefully. I think you're smarter than people give you credit for. I think you understand more than you let on. So understand this. What you've drawn here, what you've seen, it means nothing. Do you know why?" The boy stared at him, silent. "Because you cannot speak. You cannot testify to what you've seen. You cannot explain these drawings to anyone. They're just pictures made by a mute child. And even if someone believes they mean something, even if someone tries to speak for you, that person will be sold away before they finish their sentence. Do you understand?" The boy understood the threat even if he didn't understand all the words. "I could punish you now," Crane continued. "I could beat you for spying, for being in places you shouldn't be, for drawing things that aren't your business. But I'm not going to do that. Do you know why?" Head shake. "Because that would draw attention. Better to let you fade back into invisibility. But you need to stop these drawings. Stop watching me. Stop recording things. From now on, you draw flowers, you draw birds, you draw whatever harmless nonsense children draw. Anything else." He paused. Accidents happen to children, too. Especially children who see things they shouldn't. He handed back the slates. "Do we understand each other?" The boy nodded slowly. "Good." Crane stood. "Return to your quarters. And remember, you are property. Property has no voice, no testimony, no rights. The sooner you accept that, the safer you'll be." He walked away, leaving the boy standing in the dark with his slate boards. The boy returned to the quarters. Marcus was waiting, saw the boy's expression. What happened? The boy couldn't explain, couldn't tell Marcus about the threat, about Crane's words, about the fear that was now sitting in his chest like a stone. But he could draw. He found paper, scraps that Ruthie the laundress saved for him, and a piece of charcoal. He drew through the night, working by dim candlelight while others slept. He drew the complete sequence, the office meeting, the machinery, the wagon brake, and now, added to the end, Crane's face during their conversation, the threatening gesture, the warning. By morning, he had 7 drawings arranged in order, telling a story he still didn't fully understand but knew was important. Marcus found him at dawn, exhausted, surrounded by drawings. "Lord, child," Marcus whispered. "You don't listen, do you?" The boy looked at him with desperate eyes. He was trying to communicate something urgent, something dangerous, something that mattered. Marcus gathered the drawings carefully. I'll hide these. Somewhere safe. You can't carry them around anymore. Crane will destroy them, destroy you. He paused. And I'm going to try to figure out what this means. What you saw. Because I think. He looked at the sequence of drawings again. I think you might have seen something terrible being planned. The boy nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes. That's what he'd been trying to show. All right, Marcus said quietly. Then we need to be smart about this. Smarter than they think we can be. He wrapped the drawings in oilcloth and buried them at the edge of the woods, marking the spot with an arrangement of stones that looked natural but that he could recognize. The boy watched, understanding, evidence preserved, testimony hidden, witness protected. For now. The day after Crane's warning, the boy was reassigned. No explanation, just a different name called during morning assignments. Thomas. Field work. Report to Joseph Webb, Section 4. Field work meant cotton picking, meant full days under the sun with quotas that had to be met. It was harder than water duty, harder than fireplace maintenance. For a small child, it was nearly impossible. Marcus, working nearby, understood immediately. This was punishment disguised as reassignment. Crane was moving the boy away from the main house, away from places where he might see or hear things, away from his drawing materials. You'll be all right, Marcus told the boy during the first morning break. Stay near me when you can. I'll help you make quota. But staying near Marcus wasn't always possible. Joseph Webb kept them separated deliberately, seemed to understand that the boy had allies and wanted to isolate him. Webb was different from Crane. Where Crane was controlled and calculating, Webb was volatile. He carried a whip and used it liberally. He shouted. He threatened. His presence made everyone work faster out of fear rather than efficiency. The boy learned quickly. Keep your head down, work steadily, don't draw attention. But his hands, used to carrying water buckets, weren't adapted to cotton picking. The bowls cut his fingers. The repetitive motion made his shoulders ache. By the end of the first day, he'd met only 60% of quota. Webb noticed. You slow, boy. Tomorrow you better do better, or you'll learn what happens to lazy workers. That night, the boy's hands were bleeding. Aunt Bess cleaned them, wrapped them in cloth strips torn from old rags. Why'd they move you to field work? She asked. You're not built for this. The boy couldn't explain. Marcus answered for him. Crane wants him away from the big house. Why? Because the boy saw something. Drew something. Something that scared Crane. Aunt Bess looked at the boy sharply. What did you see, child? The boy made helpless gestures, too complex to communicate without drawings, without time, without shared language. Ruthie, who'd been listening from across the cabin, said, I heard Mr. Belfountain owes money. Big money. Heard he might lose the plantation. Where'd you hear that? Marcus asked. Kitchen talk. The white folks don't watch their words around us, think we are deaf as well as dumb. She looked at the boy. This got something to do with debt. The boy nodded eagerly. Yes, debt was part of it. And insurance. And accidents. And December. Can't tell us more, can you? Aunt Bess said gently. Head shake. Then we just have to trust that what you saw was real, and was dangerous. She finished wrapping his hands. You be careful in those fields. Webb's mean, but Crane smart. Smart's more dangerous. Over the following days, new tensions emerged. Crane instituted random searches of the quarters. Looking for what, he didn't specify, contraband, stolen goods, anything that could justify increased control. The searches were irregular, unpredictable. Overseers would arrive after dark, make everyone stand outside while they rifled through belongings. Most people had nothing, a change of clothes, maybe a small personal item, nothing else. But the searches created fear, destroyed any sense of privacy or safety. During one search, they found Marcus's hidden possessions: a primer, a small collection of reading materials he'd accumulated over years. Literacy was illegal for enslaved people in Louisiana. Possessing books was evidence of crime. Crane held up the primer. "Where did you get this?" Marcus said nothing. "You can read." Still silence. "Interesting." Crane pocketed the book. "We'll discuss this later." Marcus was locked in the equipment shed overnight. Not beaten, not yet, but isolated. A warning. A demonstration of power. The boy watched this happen and understood. Marcus had helped him, and now Marcus was being punished. The connection wasn't explicit, but it was there. The next morning, during fieldwork, the boy tried to work faster, tried to make full quota, tried not to give Webb any excuse for complaint. His wrapped hands hurt, but he pushed through. Webb watched him with suspicious attention. "You trying hard today. Why is that? Yesterday you were lazy. Today you're industrious. What changed?" The boy didn't answer, couldn't answer. "You know what I think." Webb moved closer, voice lowering so other workers couldn't hear. "I think you and Marcus and some others got something going. Crane thinks so too. And when we figure out what it is, there's going to be consequences." The boy kept picking cotton, hands moving automatically, fear making his movements mechanical. That evening, Marcus was released from a shed. His face was bruised. Someone had hit him, though not severely. Just enough to hurt, to remind, to warn. He found the boy after dinner. "Don't feel bad about this. This isn't your fault." But the boy did feel bad. He'd drawn the pictures, had exposed the information, had created this chain of events. Marcus seemed to read his expression. "Listen to me. What you saw, what you drew, that's important. Important enough that Crane is scared. Important enough that he's trying to silence anyone who might believe you. That means what you saw was real." The boy gestured. "But what was it? What did I see?" "I've been thinking about that," Marcus said quietly. "Those drawings you made, the meeting, the machinery, the wagon brake. I think Crane's planning to kill Mr. Belfountain. Make it look like an accident. There's insurance money involved, debt that would be cleared. And Crane probably gets paid by whoever benefits from Belfountain's death." The boy's eyes widened. Murder. That's what the overheard conversation had been about. That's what accidental death meant. "But here's the problem," Marcus continued. "You saw it. You documented it. But you can't testify. And I can't testify because I'm property. And my testimony means nothing against a white man. So right now, Crane thinks he's safe. He thinks he can proceed because there's no way to expose him." The boy felt helpless. He'd seen the crime being planned, had created evidence, but the evidence was meaningless. "We need to find someone who will listen," Marcus said. "Someone white, someone who has authority, someone who might believe us despite everything." But who? The overseers worked for Crane. The local sheriff worked for landowners like Belfountain. The entire legal system was designed to ignore testimony from enslaved people. Over the next week, rumors spread through the plantation's enslaved community. People whispered, "The mute boy saw something." Crane's scared of a child who can't even talk. Marcus got beat for having books. Something bad's coming. The rumors created fractures. Some people wanted to help, wanted to protect the boy, wanted to resist whatever Crane was planning. These were mostly the people who'd suffered directly under Crane's authority, who'd been whipped, punished, humiliated, and who wanted any opportunity to strike back. Others wanted distance. They argued, "This isn't our fight. White men killing white men, let them. We just need to survive." And a few saw opportunity. If Crane's authority was vulnerable, if there was chaos coming, maybe they could improve their own position by choosing the right side. Thomas, the adult enslaved man who shared a name with the boy, fell into this last category. He approached Crane one evening after work assignments. "Sir, might I speak with you?" Crane looked at him with cold evaluation. "About what?" "About Marcus and some others. About what they're doing." "And what are they doing?" "Protecting that mute boy. Acting like he's seen something important. Whispering about you, sir. About plans and dangers and warnings." Crane's expression didn't change. "What exactly have you heard?" "Just bits. They are careful. But I heard Marcus say something about evidence and making sure it's preserved. And I seen him talking to that boy a lot, like the boy's trying to tell him something." "I see." Crane pulled out a small leather pouch, extracted 2 coins, handed them to Thomas. "Keep listening. Report anything specific you hear. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Thomas walked away with his payment. Within an hour, everyone in the quarters knew what he'd done. The community had its own intelligence network, its own ways of discovering betrayal. People stopped talking to Thomas. When he approached conversations, they fell silent. When he asked questions, he got non-answers. Within days, he was socially invisible, a ghost living among the living. But the damage was done. Crane now knew that Marcus and others were actively working against him, were treating the boy's drawings as real evidence. The pressure escalated. Crane began separating the boy from his allies. Field assignments were adjusted so Marcus worked in different sections. James, Aunt Bess's grandson, was reassigned from stable work to equipment maintenance. Ruthie was moved from laundry to kitchen, under closer supervision. The boy found himself increasingly isolated. He worked long days under Webb's hostile watch, returned to quarters exhausted, had limited opportunity to communicate with the few people who understood his gestures. And without his drawing materials, he felt muted twice over, unable to speak with voice or image. Ruthie, despite her new assignment, managed to sneak in paper scraps and charcoal stubs. She understood that drawing wasn't a hobby for him. It was necessary, fundamental, how he thought. "Hide these good," she whispered, passing him the materials. "If they find them, you'll be punished, and I'll be sold." That night, the boy drew again. Not the conspiracy this time. Those drawings were buried, preserved. Instead, he drew his current experience. Webb watching him work, the exhaustion, the isolation, the fear. He was creating a different kind of documentation now, testimony of retaliation, evidence of punishment for witnessing. Marcus, working distant fields, found ways to check on the boy. Brief moments during water breaks, quick conversations while moving between assignments. "You holding up?" The boy shrugged, a gesture that meant barely. "I'm working on something. A plan. Just hold on." But what plan could work? They were trapped in a system designed to prevent exactly what they needed: being heard, being believed, having authority listen to testimony from people the law considered property. Then Marcus heard about the lawyer. It came through the plantation's information network, the kitchen workers who heard Belfountain's conversations, the house servants who saw correspondence, the workers who overheard planning. Theodore Ashmore, a lawyer from Baton Rouge, was coming to review Belfountain's financial documents. He was due to arrive in 2 weeks for an audit, to examine the plantation's books in preparation for the December debt settlement. Marcus understood immediately. This was the opportunity. Ashmore was an outsider, not connected to Crane, not part of the plantation's authority structure. If they could get the boy's evidence to Ashmore, if they could show him the drawings, explain the conspiracy. But how? How do enslaved people approach a white lawyer with accusations of murder conspiracy based on a mute child's drawings? It seemed impossible. Marcus shared the information with Aunt Bess and a few trusted others. They gathered in the woods one evening after work, away from informants, away from overseers. "A lawyer coming here gives us a chance," Marcus said. "But we have to be smart. We can't just approach him. That would get us killed before we finished explaining. Maybe Samuel Garrett. Aunt Bess suggested. Garrett was the youngest overseer, occasionally showed small kindnesses, seemed less committed to cruelty than Crane or Webb. Maybe, Marcus said doubtfully. But he works for Crane. Would he risk his position? They debated options, possibilities, risks. Every plan seemed to carry impossible danger. The boy sat among them, listening, understanding most of it. He gestured. The drawings. Show the drawings to the lawyer. We know, child, Aunt Bess said gently. But how? We can't just walk up to a white lawyer and hand him pictures. The boy gestured more frantically. Garrett. Show Garrett. Garrett shows lawyer. Marcus considered this. It's risky. But maybe if Garrett sees the evidence first, understands what it shows, he might be troubled enough to take it to Ashmore. And if he takes it to Crane instead? Someone asked. Then we are dead, Marcus said bluntly. But we are probably dead anyway. Crane's going to kill Bull Fountain, then kill anyone who knows about it. Our choice is die silent or die trying. The group fell quiet. That was the calculation. Certain death through silence, possible survival through resistance. I'll approach Garrett, Marcus decided. Carefully. Feel him out first, see if he's the kind of man who might help. The boy grabbed Marcus's arm, shaking his head. Too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now, Marcus said quietly. But you're the one who saw. You're the one who documented. You started this because you couldn't help recording what you saw. Now we have to finish it. Over the next days, Marcus watched Samuel Garrett carefully. Garrett was 22, had been an overseer for less than a year. He'd grown up poor, had taken the overseer position for the wages, seemed uncomfortable with the violence required of him. Marcus saw Garrett hesitate before delivering punishments. Saw him look away when Webb whipped someone. Saw him treat enslaved workers with baseline human courtesy, not kindness exactly, but acknowledgement that they existed as people. It wasn't much, but it was more than Crane or Webb offered. Marcus engineered a moment. He was hauling equipment past the barn when Garrett was alone, checking horse tackle. Mr. Garrett, sir. Garrett turned. Yes. Might I ask you something? Personal matter, sir. Garrett looked uncomfortable. Enslaved people didn't usually initiate conversations with overseers. But he nodded. Quickly. That mute boy. Thomas. You know him. The water carrier. Yes. Why? He's been moved to field work. Under Webb's supervision. It's not going well. That's not my concern. Work assignments are Crane's decision. Yes, sir. But the boy, he saw something. Something bad. And now he's being punished for it, even though he can't tell anyone what he saw. Garrett's expression shifted slightly. What did he see? I can't explain it proper. But he drew pictures. Detailed pictures. Of plans. Dangerous plans. Pictures. Garrett looked skeptical. The boy's mute, possibly simple-minded. Children draw fantasies. These ain't fantasies, sir. These are observations. That boy's smart, smarter than anyone gives him credit for. He sees things, remembers things, documents things. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because in 2 weeks, a lawyer's coming. Mr. Ashmore. And if someone could show him those drawings, explain what they mean, maybe something could be done before something terrible happens. Before what happens? Marcus took the risk. Before Mr. Belfountain has an accident that ain't an accident. Garrett's face went pale. That's a serious accusation. Yes, sir. That's why I'm risking my life telling you instead of staying silent. Who's planning this supposed accident? Marcus held Garrett's gaze but didn't answer. Didn't need to. The implication was clear. Garrett looked away. I can't help you. What you're suggesting? If you're wrong, I lose my position. If you're right, I'm accusing my superior of conspiracy to murder. Either way, I'm destroyed. Yes, sir. I understand. Marcus started to walk away. Wait. Garrett's voice was quiet. These drawings. Where are they? Hidden. Safe. Could I see them? Just to understand what you're talking about. Marcus felt hope flicker. Yes, sir. I could show you. Tonight, after dark, at the edge of the woods near the equipment shed. No witnesses. No, sir. Just you and me. That night, Marcus met Garrett in the darkness at the designated spot. He'd retrieved the drawings from their hiding place, brought them wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped them carefully, laid them out in sequence. Garrett studied them by lamplight, his expression growing more troubled with each image. The first drawing, 3 men in Belfountain's office. Garrett recognized Belfountain and Crane, could see the stranger with the satchel was someone official, someone from outside. The second, Crane at the sugar press machinery, examining mechanisms. The third, Crane underneath the wagon, removing something from the brake. The 4th through 7th, additional details, time sequences, the boy's documentation of suspicious activity over multiple days. The boy drew all these. Garrett asked. Yes, sir. He draws everything he sees. It's how his mind works. And you think this shows Crane planning to kill Mr. Belfountain? I think it shows meetings about money and insurance, followed by Crane tampering with equipment that Mr. Belfountain uses. You put those things together, sir, and it looks like planned murder made to look like accident. Garrett stared at the drawings. This could be innocent. Crane inspects equipment regularly. That's his job. Why's he removing brake pieces then, sir? Why's he meeting with insurance men? You don't know that's what the stranger was. That could be any businessman. Could be. But add it all up, and it feels wrong. Don't it feel wrong to you, sir? Garrett was quiet for a long time. Finally, yes. It feels wrong. But feelings aren't evidence. A mute child's drawings aren't evidence. No court would accept this. What if the boy could testify? Not with words, but by showing. What if the lawyer could see these drawings, could question the boy in his own way, could investigate what's shown here? The boy can't testify. He's enslaved and mute. He has no legal standing. But if Mr. Belfountain dies exactly the way these drawings suggest he might, then suddenly these drawings look like prophecy, look like warning, look like evidence. Garrett wrapped the drawings back up, handed them to Marcus. I need time to think about this, to decide if I believe this is real or if I'm being manipulated. We don't have much time, sir. 2 weeks until the lawyer arrives. And I think Crane's planning to act before then. Why do you think that? Because he's rushing things, changing assignments, moving people around, isolating witnesses. That's not normal behavior. That's someone preparing for something. Garrett left without promising anything. Marcus returned the drawings to their hiding place, unsure if he'd gained an ally or exposed them all to greater danger. The next day, Marcus watched Garrett carefully. The young overseer seemed distracted, troubled, spent more time than usual observing Crane's movements. And Crane noticed. During the afternoon work assignments, Crane pulled Garrett aside for a private conversation that looked tense. Marcus couldn't hear what was said, but he could read body language. Crane asserting authority, Garrett defending himself, tension between them. That evening, Webb found Marcus in the fields. Crane wants to see you. Equipment shed. Now. Marcus's stomach dropped. This was bad. Being summoned to the shed usually meant punishment, interrogation, or both. He walked to the shed with Webb behind him. Inside, Crane waited with a lamp, a chair, and a length of rope. "Sit," Crane ordered. Marcus Saturday. Webb tied his hands to the chair, not tight enough to cut circulation, but secure. Crane circled him slowly. "You've been talking to Garrett." "About what?" "Just work matters, sir." "Don't lie." "Garrett came to me today asking strange questions about my work routines, about equipment inspections." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, sir. Just mentioned that the mute boy's been moved to harder work, asked if Mr. Garrett could intervene." "Why would you ask Garrett instead of coming to me directly?" "Didn't want to bother you, sir." Crane stopped circling. "I think you've been filling Garrett's head with fantasies. Stories about that mute boy seeing things, documenting things, creating doubt where there should be certainty." "No, sir." "Yes." Crane's voice was calm, which made it more frightening. "You're trying to weaponize that child's drawings. Turn them into something they're not. Create conspiracy where there's only routine work." "I don't know what you mean, sir." Crane leaned close. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop talking to Garrett. Stop talking to anyone about that boy and his drawings. You're going to work, keep quiet, and wait for your next assignment. If you don't, I'll have you sold south to the sugar plantations in the deep parishes where they work people to death in 3 years. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "And if anything happens to Mr. Belfountain, anything at all, and I discover you've been spreading rumors or accusations, I'll make sure you're blamed for it. Conspiracy to murder a white man carries the death penalty, even for slaves. Especially for literate slaves who might be smart enough to plan such things." The threat was clear: stay silent or die. Crane untied him. "Go. And remember what I said." Marcus returned to the quarters, shaken. The boy saw his face and understood immediately. Something had gone very wrong. That night, Marcus gathered the group again. Aunt Bess, James, Ruthie, the few others who could be trusted. "Crane knows we are trying something. He's threatened me directly. If we keep pushing, some of us will die." "So we stop?" Aunt Bess asked. "I don't know. Maybe trying to expose him is suicide." The boy gestured frantically. "No. Can't stop. He'll kill anyway." Marcus looked at him. "You really believe that? That Crane will kill us even if we stay silent?" The boy nodded emphatically. "Yes. Because we know. Knowledge is dangerous." "He's right," James said quietly. "Crane can't leave witnesses. Whether we talk or not, we are threats just by existing." Aunt Bess closed her eyes. "Lord help us. Damned if we speak, dead if we are silent." "Then we speak," Marcus decided. "We go forward with the plan. Try to get the evidence to the lawyer when he arrives. It's a small chance, but it's better than no chance." Over the following week, the boy's work conditions deteriorated further. Webb drove him harder, assigned impossible quotas, kept him working until he could barely stand. Other workers tried to help, sharing their pickings, offering water, taking some of his load, but Webb noticed and punished anyone who assisted. "That boy works his own quota or faces consequences," Webb announced. "Anyone helping him faces the same." The community was forced to watch the boy suffer without intervening. The cruelty was the point: isolate the witness, break him down, demonstrate power. On the 6th day of this brutal treatment, the boy collapsed in the field. Heatstroke, dehydration, physical exhaustion. He fell unconscious, body giving out. James, working a nearby section, saw him fall and ran over despite the rules. "He needs water. He needs shade." Webb walked over slowly, looked down at the unconscious boy. "Looks like he needs to work harder, build stamina. He's a child. He's dying. Then he should have worked faster." Webb turned away. Someone carry him back to quarters. If he survives, he can return to work tomorrow. James and another worker carried the boy back. Aunt Bess took over, using every remedy she knew: water with salt, cool cloths, whispered prayers. The boy remained unconscious for hours. When he finally woke, he was disoriented, feverish, his mind scattered. "Stay still," Aunt Bess commanded. "You've had heat stroke. You need rest." But the boy was agitated. He kept gesturing, trying to communicate something urgent. James brought him paper and charcoal, understanding that the boy needed to draw the way others needed to speak. With shaking hands, the boy drew, Webb standing over him as he collapsed, Crane's face in the background. The deliberate cruelty, the planned suffering. He was documenting his own attempted murder. Marcus saw the drawings and understood. This was escalating. They were running out of time. Crane and Webb were pushing the boy toward death, making it look like work accident, eliminating the witness before the lawyer arrived. "We can't wait 2 more weeks," Marcus told the others. "We have to act now." "How?" Aunt Bess asked. "The lawyer isn't here yet." "Then we find another way. We make noise. We create situation where someone from outside has to intervene." But what situation? What noise could enslaved people make that anyone would hear? The answer came from an unexpected source: Samuel Garrett. Garrett had been watching everything. Had seen Webb's treatment of the boy, had seen the collapse, had seen the deliberate cruelty. Combined with the drawings Marcus had shown him, combined with Crane's strange behaviors, combined with his own observations, it was adding up to something dark. Garrett made a decision. He rode to Baton Rouge on his day off, sought out Theodore Ashmore's law office, requested a private meeting. "Mr. Ashmore, sir, I need to report something. Something urgent involving the Bellefontaine plantation." Ashmore, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and skeptical bearing, gestured to a chair. "I'm scheduled to visit that plantation in 10 days for financial review." "What's urgent?" "I believe there's a conspiracy to murder Pierre Bellefontaine. For insurance money and inheritance transfer." Ashmore's expression didn't change. He'd heard many wild accusations in his career. "That's a serious claim. What evidence do you have?" "Testimony from an enslaved worker, and drawings by a mute child who witnessed meetings and suspicious activities." "Testimony from slaves is inadmissible, and children's drawings aren't evidence." "I know, sir, but I've seen the drawings. They're detailed, sequential, and they show a pattern of behavior that suggests planned murder." "Who's supposedly planning this?" Garrett hesitated. This was the moment. Once he named Crane, there was no going back. "Matthias Crane, the head overseer. I believe he's made arrangements with someone to cause Bellefontaine's death in a way that appears accidental." "And you're reporting this why? He's your superior." "Because it's wrong, sir. And because they're now targeting the child who witnessed it. He collapsed from heat stroke 2 days ago. I think they're trying to kill him before anyone can take his testimony seriously." Ashmore leaned back. "You understand what you're risking? If you're wrong, you'll never work as an overseer again. If you're right, you're exposing yourself to retaliation from dangerous men." "Yes, sir. I understand." "Show me these drawings." "They're hidden on the plantation. I can retrieve them when you come for your review." "That's 10 days from now. You said this was urgent." "It is, sir. I think the murder attempt will happen soon, possibly before your scheduled visit." Ashmore considered. "I can move my visit earlier. Claim urgent financial review. Arrive tomorrow. That will disrupt any immediate plans and give me time to investigate your claims." Garrett felt relief flood through him. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. If this is fantasy or manipulation, I'll see you prosecuted for wasting my time and filing false reports." "I understand, sir." That evening, Garrett returned to the plantation and sought out Marcus. "The lawyer's coming tomorrow. Early. Be ready." Marcus felt his heart race. Tomorrow. But Crane's going to act soon. I can feel it. The boy's collapse, the increased pressure, the timeline. Something's happening. So I accelerated things. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. This could get us all killed." Garrett paused. "Have the boy ready. And those drawings. Ashmore will want to see everything." That night, the enslaved community sensed something coming. Word spread quietly. The lawyer arrives tomorrow. Something's happening. Be ready. No one knew what be ready meant. But they prepared. Tools placed strategically, routes planned, alliances confirmed. If there was violence, if there was confrontation, they'd respond. The boy, still weak from heatstroke, forced himself to sit up, to focus. James brought him the hidden drawings, helped him organize them into sequence. "Tomorrow," James told him. "Tomorrow someone finally listens." The boy nodded, but his eyes showed doubt. He'd been ignored for so long, dismissed as simple-minded for so long. Could a lawyer, could anyone, really see past his muteness to the intelligence underneath? Across the plantation, Crane was also preparing. He'd noticed Garrett's absence during his day off, had noticed Garrett's increased attention to the boy, had sensed something shifting. He summoned Webb. "Tomorrow. The press facility. We proceed with the original plan." "Tomorrow. But the audit." "Because of the audit. We can't wait. Bellefontaine will be inspecting equipment before the lawyer arrives. Wants everything in order. That's our window." "What about the boy? The witnesses?" "After Bellefontaine's death, we'll handle them. An accident following an accident, tragic loss of life, but these things happen." Webb understood. Kill Bellefontaine, then kill the boy and anyone who might speak for him. Eliminate all threats at once. The stage was set. Multiple plans in motion, multiple groups preparing for confrontation, all converging on the following day. Theodore Ashmore's carriage arrived at Bellefontaine Plantation 2 hours after dawn. He'd left Baton Rouge at first light, claiming urgent need to review financial documents before the scheduled audit date. Pierre Bellefontaine, surprised but accommodating, met him at the main house. "Mr. Ashmore, I wasn't expecting you until next week. Apologies for the sudden arrival. I've reviewed preliminary documents and have questions that require immediate attention. Time-sensitive matters regarding debt structure and insurance obligations." The word insurance made Bellefontaine tense slightly. "Of course. Whatever you need. I'll need access to your complete financial records, policy documents, and I'd like to inspect the plantation's major assets and equipment to assess collateral value." "Certainly. Matthias Crane, my head overseer, can guide you through the facilities." "Actually," Ashmore said carefully, "I'd prefer an independent inspection. If you or another overseer could accompany me, someone not directly involved in asset management." Bellefontaine looked confused but agreed. "Samuel Garrett can assist you. He's one of my overseers, knows the operations well." Perfect. Exactly what Garrett and Ashmore had planned. While Ashmore began examining financial documents in Bellefontaine's study, Garrett sent word to Marcus, "Bring the boy and the drawings. Born. Now." Marcus found the boy in the quarters, still recovering but alert. "Time to go. Can you walk?" The boy nodded, stood shakily. James helped support him. They gathered the hidden drawings, wrapped them carefully, and moved toward the barn. Other workers created small distractions, conversations with overseers, minor equipment issues, anything to draw attention away from Marcus and the boy's movement. In the barn, Garrett waited with nervous energy. When Marcus and the boy arrived, he said. Mr. Ashmore's in the main house reviewing finances. I'm supposed to guide him on equipment inspection in an hour. I need to show him the drawings first, let him question the boy. How do we do that without everyone knowing? Marcus asked. I'll bring him here. Claim I need to check something in the barn first, before the formal inspection. You wait here with the boy. When we arrive, show him everything. It was risky. Meeting secretly with a white lawyer while hiding in a barn with stolen documentation could be interpreted as conspiracy, insurrection, any number of capital crimes. But there were no safe options anymore. Garrett left to fetch Ashmore. Marcus and the boy waited in the dim barn, surrounded by hay and horse tackle and the smell of animals. You scared? Marcus asked the boy. The boy nodded. Me too. But this is what we've been working toward. Someone with power, actually willing to listen. The boy unwrapped the drawings, arranged them in sequence on a clean section of hay bale. 7 drawings, telling a story of conspiracy, murder planning, witness intimidation. Footsteps approached. Garrett entered with Ashmore. The lawyer stopped when he saw Marcus and the boy. His expression was unreadable, professional, controlled, revealing nothing. Mr. Ashmore, Garrett said, this is Marcus, and this is the boy I told you about. They have the evidence. Ashmore approached slowly. He looked at the boy, small, thin, still showing signs of recent illness. You're the one who made these drawings. The boy nodded. And you can't speak. Another nod. But you can understand me. Yes. Ashmore knelt beside the arranged drawings, examining each one carefully. His face remained neutral, but Marcus could see his eyes moving quickly, taking in details, making mental notes. This first drawing shows 3 men in what appears to be Pierre Bellefontain's study. Can you identify these men? The boy pointed to each figure. Bellefontaine, Crane, the stranger. You saw this meeting? You were in the room. The boy gestured. Nearby, working, overheard. Marcus translated. He was cleaning the fireplace in the adjoining room. Door was open. He heard and saw them. What did he hear? The boy made frustrated gestures. So much information, no way to convey it. Marcus helped. Something about insurance. Debt. Accidental death. Payment. Ashmore's expression shifted slightly. The first crack in his professional neutrality. Those are serious words to overhear. He moved to the next drawing. Crane at the sugar press machinery. And this. The boy pointed to himself, then gestured. Watching, saw Crane examining equipment, unusual behavior. The third drawing. The wagon brake. The boy's gestures became more emphatic. Crane removed something, took it away, sabotage. Ashmore studied this drawing longest. You saw him tamper with the wagon brake. Vigorous nodding. Could you identify which wagon? The boy gestured. Big one, flatbed, for heavy loads. Mr. Bellefontaine uses that wagon for transport, Garrett interjected. He was scheduled to ride it last week for equipment delivery, but the trip was postponed. Postponed why? Mr. Bellefontaine received an anonymous note warning him to check the wagon brake before using it. He inspected it, found nothing wrong, assumed the note was mischief. Ashmore looked at Marcus. Who wrote that note? I did, sir, Marcus admitted. Based on what the boy showed me in his drawings. I was trying to warn Mr. Bellefontaine without revealing who we were or what we knew. You can write. Yes, sir. Marcus braced for the consequences of admitting illegal literacy. But Ashmore just nodded and returned to the drawings. The remaining images showed time sequences, additional observations, the pattern of Crane's suspicious behavior over days. This is remarkable documentation, Ashmore said quietly. Detailed, sequential, observant. But it's also circumstantial. It shows suspicious behavior, but it doesn't prove murder conspiracy. There's more, sir, Garrett said. The boy collapsed from heat stroke 6 days ago, after Crane discovered he'd been making these drawings. Since then, both Crane and Joseph Webb have been pushing him deliberately toward injury or death. It looks like witness elimination. Ashmore studied the boy's pale, thin face. Is that true? Have they been mistreating you? The boy nodded emphatically, then reached for more paper. His hand shook from weakness, but he drew quickly, Webb standing over him as he collapsed, Crane watching, the deliberate cruelty. He's documenting his own attempted murder, Marcus said. Ashmore stood, paced the barn, thinking. Even with all this, legal proof is difficult. The boy can't testify verbally. His drawings are compelling but inadmissible as direct evidence. And accusing a white overseer of murder conspiracy based on a mute enslaved child's observations, no court would convene on this alone. So we can't stop him? Garrett asked. We just let Crane proceed. I didn't say that. Ashmore's voice was cold, determined. I said legal proof is difficult, but prevention is possible. If I'm here, conducting an audit, personally inspecting equipment and finances, it becomes much harder for Crane to engineer an accident without being caught. He might try anyway, Garrett warned. He seems desperate. Then we'll be ready. Ashmore looked at Marcus and the boy. I need these drawings. They'll be preserved as evidence, even if they can't be used in court immediately. If anything happens to Mr. Belfountain, these drawings will help establish premeditation and conspiracy. The boy hesitated, then handed over the drawings. They were his only voice, his only testimony. Giving them away felt like surrendering his ability to communicate. Ashmore seemed to understand. I'll protect them. And I'll protect you. You have my word. Your word doesn't mean much if you're not here, sir, Marcus said carefully. And you can't stay forever. No. But I can disrupt Crane's timeline, investigate his background, examine the insurance policies, and create enough legal scrutiny that murdering Belfountain becomes far more dangerous than not murdering him. A voice from outside the barn. Mr. Garrett? Mr. Ashmore? Mr. Belfountain is ready to begin the equipment inspection. It was one of the house servants, sent to locate them. We are coming, Garrett called back. He looked at Marcus and the boy. You two stay out of sight. Return to your regular assignments. Act normal. Normal? Marcus said bitterly. There's nothing normal about any of this. Ashmore paused at the barn door. You've done something brave here. All of you. Braver than most men I know. Whatever happens next, remember that. He and Garrett left. Marcus and the boy remained in the barn for a few minutes, letting their hearts slow, letting the reality settle. We did it, Marcus said quietly. We got someone to listen. The boy didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. Because now Crane would know they'd betrayed him. Now there would be consequences. Across the plantation, in the equipment shed, Crane and Webb were having their own conversation. Garrett's been with that lawyer for too long, Crane observed. They should have started the equipment inspection by now. Maybe the lawyer had more questions. Maybe. Crane didn't believe it. Something was wrong. He could feel the careful structure he'd built beginning to fracture. Do we proceed? Webb asked. Belfountain's scheduled to inspect the press facility this afternoon. Crane considered. If he proceeded with the murder attempt now, with a lawyer on the premises asking questions, it would look suspicious. But if he waited, more time passed, more opportunities for exposure emerged. We proceed, he decided. But differently. Not the press. Too many people around with the lawyer here. The wagon instead. Belfountain will need to transport the lawyer back to Baton Rouge this evening. We'll offer to prepare the wagon, make sure it's in good condition. A thoughtful gesture. and tamper with it on the journey. Brake failure on the return road. Steep grade near mile marker 7. Wagon loses control, goes down the embankment. Tragique accident. No witnesses except whoever's driving, and we'll make sure that's someone we control. Webb smiled. Better than the press. More isolated. Prepare the wagon. I'll suggest the transport arrangement to Bellefontaine. Throughout the afternoon, 2 parallel operations unfolded. Ashmore conducted his inspection, examining equipment with Garrett's guidance. He looked at the sugar press, asked technical questions, inspected safety mechanisms, looked at the wagons, examined brakes and axles and harnesses, took meticulous notes. He was thorough, professional, giving no indication that he was looking for evidence of sabotage or murder planning. Just a lawyer doing due diligence for a financial audit. But his questions were sharp. To Bellefontaine, your insurance policy has a double indemnity clause for accidental death? That's unusual for personal policies. My financial advisor recommended it. Given the debt situation, it seemed prudent. Who recommended this advisor? Matthias Crane, actually. Said the man had helped other planters with similar financial restructuring. I'd like to meet this advisor. Interview him as part of the audit. He's not local, based in New Orleans, but I can provide his contact information. Please do. Meanwhile, Crane and Webb prepared the wagon. They worked in the transport shed, away from observers. Webb lay underneath the wagon, loosening the brake mechanism's connecting pin. Not removing it completely, that would be too obvious. Just loosening it enough that sustained use would cause failure. How long before it fails? Crane asked. Hard to say exactly. Could be 5 miles, could be 20. But on that steep grade near mile marker 7, the extra strain would definitely trigger it. And the crash? At that speed, on that grade? Fatal or close to it. They finished their work, pulled the wagon out, made it look prepared and ready. Crane found Bellefontaine. Sir, I've prepared the large wagon for Mr. Ashmore's return journey. It's comfortable, well maintained. I thought given his status, we should offer quality transport. Bellefontaine appreciated the thoughtfulness. Excellent idea, Matthias. I'll ride with him myself, discuss the financial matters on the journey. Crane's heart sank. He'd assumed Bellefontaine would send Ashmore with a driver, not accompany him personally. If Bellefontaine was in the wagon, the plan worked. But if both Bellefontaine and Ashmore died together, suspicion would be enormous. A lawyer and a plantation owner dying together in a convenient accident during a financial audit? Too obvious. Too suspicious. But the plan was in motion. The wagon was prepared. The brake loosened. Stopping now meant admitting sabotage. Crane calculated quickly. Perhaps the brake wouldn't fail. Perhaps they'd reach Baton Rouge safely and he'd have to attempt something else later. Or perhaps the brake would fail, but only partially, causing minor accident rather than fatal crash. Or perhaps everyone would die and Crane would have to flee before questions arose. Evening approached. Ashmore concluded his inspection, collected his preliminary notes. I'll need to return to Baton Rouge to file these documents and begin formal investigation of the insurance arrangements. Mr. Bellefontaine, I recommend you postpone any major equipment use or transport until I've completed my review. Postpone. That could delay the harvest. It's a precaution. Given the financial irregularities I found, I want to ensure all assets are properly documented before they're put at risk. What irregularities? I'll detail them in my formal report. For now, trust that caution is warranted. Bellefontaine looked troubled but agreed. Very well. We'll limit operations until you've completed your audit. As they prepared to depart, Crane brought the wagon around. Ready for your journey, sir. Comfortable wagon, fresh horses, should be a smooth ride. Ashmore approached the wagon, examined it with the same careful attention he'd given everything else that day. He checked the wheels, the axle, the harness connections. Then he knelt and looked underneath. Crane felt his pulse quicken. Could Ashmore see the loosened pin? Would he notice? Ashmore stood, brushed dust from his pants. "Mr. Belfountain, I'd prefer to take my own horse. The wagon seems adequate, but I prefer to control my own transport." "Are you sure? The wagon's quite comfortable." "I'm sure. Thank you for the offer." Crane's mind raced. Had Ashmore seen something? Did he suspect? Belfountain shrugged. "As you wish. Matthias, we won't need the wagon. Have someone return it to storage." As Ashmore mounted his horse and prepared to leave, he made eye contact with Garrett. A brief nod, a signal. Message understood. Garrett waited until Ashmore had departed, then approached the wagon. He made a show of inspecting it for storage, but really he was looking for what Ashmore had seen. He found it, the loosened brake pin, barely hanging in place. One more mile of use and it would have failed completely. Garrett's hand shook. The boy's drawings had been accurate. Crane really had been planning murder. And Garrett had almost let Belfountain ride that wagon to his death. He secured the brake properly, returned the wagon to storage, said nothing. But he made a decision. He was done protecting Crane. Whatever came next, he'd stand with the truth. That night, the plantation was tense. Everyone sensed something had happened, though few knew exactly what. In the quarters, Marcus gathered with the boy, Aunt Bess, James, and Ruthie. "The lawyer took the drawings," Marcus reported. "He listened. He believed us. And he saw something on that wagon, something that made him refuse to ride in it." "So Crane tried today?" Aunt Bess asked. "Looks like it. But it failed. The lawyer's too smart." "What happens now?" "Now Crane knows his plan is falling apart, which makes him more dangerous. Cornered animals lash out." The boy gestured. "What do we do?" "We stay visible. Stay together. Make it hard for Crane to pick us off one by one. And we trust that the lawyer will move fast." But Crane was already moving. Late that night, he met with Webb in the equipment shed. "Everything's collapsing. Garrett's turned against us. I'm certain of it. That lawyer saw through the insurance scheme. And those slaves have evidence, testimonies, drawings." "So we run?" Webb asked. "No. We eliminate the evidence. All of it. Tonight." The boy, Marcus, anyone who's seen those drawings or knows what they show. "We stage a fire in the quarters." Tragique accident. Lantern tipped over, old wood structures, trap sleepers. Several casualties including those specific individuals. Webb looked uncertain. That's mass murder. That's survival. If we don't act now, we'll hang. You understand? They have evidence. They have witnesses. Our only option is to destroy both." "And Garrett?" "Garrett's an overseer. White. He can claim he was misled, manipulated by slave conspirators. He'll be fine. But us. We're the conspirators. Unless we change the narrative." Webb still hesitated. He was violent, cruel, but this was different. This was killing dozens of people to cover up a failed murder plot. Crane saw his hesitation. "You're already complicit. You tampered with the wagon. You've been enforcing the punishment on that boy. You're in this as deep as I am. The only question is whether we die for it or survive." Webb made his decision. "When?" 3 hours. After midnight. Everyone's asleep. We'll start it in the far corner. Let it spread. Make sure the boys' cabin catches first. That's the primary target." They began preparing, rags soaked in lamp oil, torches, a story about seeing someone suspicious near the quarters before the fire started. But they weren't the only ones planning. Marcus couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. He'd felt it all evening, the particular kind of tension that preceded violence. He'd learned to trust that instinct. Had kept him alive through too many dangerous situations. He rose quietly, moved through the quarters, woke James. Something's coming. I can feel it. What? Don't know. But we need to be ready. Wake the others. Quietly. Tell them to be prepared to run if necessary. James moved through the cabin, waking people with whispered warnings. Within minutes, most of the cabin's occupants were quietly awake, alert, waiting. The boy woke to James's hand on his shoulder. He sat up, immediately tense. Something might happen tonight, James whispered. Stay close to me. At 2 a.m., Crane and Webb approached the quarters with their prepared materials. The plantation was dark, silent. Perfect conditions. They split up. Webb would start the fire at one corner, Crane at another. They'd make sure the boys' cabin was the first fully engulfed, then spread it to adjacent structures. Webb knelt at the far wall of the children's cabin, pressed oil-soaked rags against the old wood, pulled out his flint. But Marcus was watching from a window. He'd positioned himself to observe the exterior, had seen the shadows moving, had seen Webb's shape against the starlight. Fire! Marcus shouted. Everyone out! Fire! His shout woke everyone, destroyed Crane and Webb's element of surprise. People poured from cabins, confused, frightened, looking for flames. Webb, panicked, lit his torch and touched it to the oiled rags. Flame caught immediately, racing up the dry wood. But people were already evacuating. The fire consumed building, not people. Crane, hearing Marcus's shout and seeing his plan failing, made a desperate decision. If he couldn't burn them, he'd catch them. He grabbed the boy, small, slow, easy target, as people ran past him in the chaos. Everyone stop! Crane shouted, pistol drawn, holding the boy against him. Everyone stop or the child dies. The evacuating crowd froze. Behind them, flames consumed the cabin, sending smoke and sparks into the night sky. Marcus! Crane called. I know you're out here. Show yourself or I shoot the boy. Marcus stepped forward, hands visible. Let him go. He's done nothing. He's done everything. He and you and your whole conspiracy. But it ends now. The growing fire illuminated the scene. Crane with pistol and hostage, Marcus confronting him, dozens of witnesses forming a circle. Conspiracy! Marcus said loudly, making sure everyone heard. The conspiracy is yours, Crane. You tried to murder Mr. Belfountain. The boy saw it, drew it, documented it. We reported it to the lawyer. That's why you're burning us out, to destroy the evidence. People murmured. Many hadn't known the full story, but now they were hearing it, understanding it. Lies, Crane said. Slave lies told by a boy who can't even speak and a field hand who can barely read. I can read fine, Marcus said. Read your insurance schemes, read your murder plans, read your desperation. Behind Crane, more people appeared. Garrett, drawn by the smoke and shouts. Several field hands, armed with farming tools. Aunt Bess, carrying a heavy iron poker. Crane was surrounded. His pistol was on the boy, but dozens of people were closing in, their fear transformed to anger. Stay back. Crane warned. I'll kill him. You'll kill him anyway, Garrett said, stepping forward. That's what tonight was about. Killing witnesses. Destroying evidence. Crane's eyes darted between faces, looking for escape routes. Garrett, you're with them. I'm with the truth, which is that you're a murderer and a conspirator and you've been caught. By who? Slaves. Their word means nothing. By me, Garrett said. White witness. Legal testimony. I saw what you did to that wagon. I know what you planned. And Mr. Ashmore knows too. He's filing charges tomorrow morning. The words hit Crane like physical blows. He'd lost. The conspiracy was exposed. The witness protection had failed. The evidence was preserved. He tightened his grip on the boy, pistol pressing harder. Then I've got nothing to lose. Except your life, came a new voice. Pierre Bellefontaine stepped into the firelight, drawn from the main house by the commotion. Behind him, several armed men, plantation security, awakened by the fire. Mr. Crane, Bellefontaine said coldly, put down the weapon and release the child. Sir, these slaves, they've been plotting against you, spreading lies. I've heard the lies. Heard them from Mr. Ashmore this afternoon. Insurance fraud. Murder conspiracy. Sabotaged equipment. All traced back to you. Bellefontaine's voice was sharp with betrayal. You were going to kill me. For money. No, sir, that's not. The wagon brake. Ashmore showed me. It had been tampered with. Just like that mute boy's drawing showed weeks ago. Crane's face went pale. The boy's drawings, dismissed as fantasy, had been accurate all along. So I'll ask once more, Bellefontaine said. Release the child. Surrender your weapon. Face trial. Or die here and now. Your choice. Crane looked around, surrounded, caught, finished. The boy in his grip could feel Crane's hand shaking, could feel the indecision. Then the boy did something unexpected. He'd been passive, frightened, helpless. But now, with Crane distracted, with the pistol's pressure briefly loosened, the boy bit down hard on Crane's wrist. Crane shouted in pain, his grip loosening. The boy twisted free and dove away. In that moment of confusion, Marcus rushed forward and tackled Crane. The pistol fired, one wild shot into the air, then clattered away. Other workers piled on, restraining Crane. Garrett recovered the weapon. Webb, who'd been hiding in the shadows, tried to run. But James and several others caught him, brought him back struggling. Within minutes, both overseers were bound, sitting in the dirt, surrounded by the people they terrorized. The fire was brought under control. One cabin destroyed, adjacent structures damaged but saved. No lives lost. Bellefontaine looked at Marcus. You saved my life. Multiple times, apparently. The boy saved your life, sir. He saw, he documented, he testified in the only way he could. Bellefontaine turned to the boy, really seeing him for the first time. Not as property, not as a mute simpleton, but as an intelligent witness who'd exposed a murder conspiracy. What's your name? Bellefontaine asked. Your real name, not just Thomas or the mute. The boy couldn't answer. Had never had a name that was truly his. Marcus said quietly, He's never had one, sir. His mother died birthing him. He's just been the boy. Bellefontaine looked uncomfortable. Well, we'll address that. Later. Garrett spoke up. Sir, these people need protection. Crane had accomplices. The insurance conspirator is still free. There might be retaliation. Agreed. Marcus, you and the others who helped expose this, you'll stay near the main house until the trial. Under guard, for your protection. It wasn't freedom. Wasn't reward. But it was acknowledgement, which was more than they'd expected. As dawn broke over the burnt cabin and exhausted people, the boy sat with his allies, Marcus, James, Aunt Bess, Garrett. They'd survived the night. But the trial was still coming. The consequences were still uncertain. And they all knew, in 1858 Louisiana, justice was never guaranteed, especially for enslaved people who dared to testify against white men. The boy looked at his hands that had drawn the evidence, that had created testimony from silence, that had exposed evil. He'd found his voice through images. But would anyone continue to listen? 3 days after the fire, Matthias Crane and Joseph Webb were transported to the Baton Rouge Parish Jail. Theodore Ashmore filed formal charges: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, attempted murder, and arson. The legal community was shocked. A white overseer accused of conspiring to kill a white plantation owner, with the primary evidence being drawings by a mute enslaved child? It was unprecedented. Some lawyers argued the case should be dismissed immediately. Slave testimony was inadmissible, and children's drawings weren't legal evidence. Others argued the evidence was compelling enough to warrant trial, especially with Samuel Garrett's corroborating testimony and Ashmore's expert documentation of the sabotaged equipment. The parish judge, Daniel Fairweather, decided to proceed to trial. But he made clear, this case will be judged on facts, not emotions. The enslaved witnesses cannot testify in the traditional sense, but their observations may be presented through lawful intermediaries. The trial was set for 3 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare. Ashmore became the de facto protector of the witnesses. He arranged for Marcus, the boy, and several others to stay in guarded quarters near Bellefontain's main house, with explicit orders that they were not to be approached, threatened, or interfered with. Pierre Bellefontaine, still processing his near murder, cooperated fully. He was angry, betrayed, and determined to see Crane punished. But he was also uncomfortable with the implications. Enslaved people had saved his life, had shown intelligence and agency that challenged everything he'd been taught about racial hierarchy. The boy found himself in a strange position. He was protected, fed adequately, given drawing materials by Ashmore, who wanted him to create additional documentation. But he was still enslaved, still property, still without legal rights. Ashmore spent hours with him, learning his gesture system, understanding how he communicated. The lawyer brought books of illustrations, anatomical drawings, maps, anything to help the boy develop more sophisticated visual language. "You have a gift," Ashmore told him during one session. "Not despite your muteness, but perhaps because of it. You see things others miss because you can't ask questions. You must observe. And you remember because you can't take notes in words. You must capture images." The boy drew in response, Ashmore's face, with an expression of kindness the boy had rarely seen from white people. "When this trial is over," Ashmore said carefully, "I'm going to petition for your freedom. I can't promise success. Louisiana law makes it nearly impossible to free enslaved people. But I'll try." The boy's eyes widened. Freedom. The concept was so foreign, so impossible, that he could barely process it. Marcus, overhearing this, said, "And the rest of us, sir? The others who testified?" Ashmore looked uncomfortable. "I'll do what I can. But legally, you're Mr. Bellefontain's property. I can't petition for your freedom without his consent." "And will he consent?" "I don't know." The days before trial were tense. Crane and Webb's defense attorney, a man named Howard Pritchard, began building his case. His strategy was simple: discredit all evidence from enslaved sources. He filed motions arguing the boy's drawings were fantasy, not documentation. Marcus's testimony was biased and self-serving. The entire case was a conspiracy by enslaved workers to eliminate white authority figures they resented. Pritchard was good at his job. He found character witnesses who testified that Crane was an upstanding overseer, that the boy was known to be simple-minded, that enslaved workers frequently lied to avoid punishment or gain favor. Ashmore countered with physical evidence: the sabotaged wagon brake, the insurance policy with suspicious provisions, the financial record showing Crane had met with the insurance agent multiple times. But the most anticipated moment was the boy's testimony, or rather, the presentation of his evidence. Louisiana law prohibited enslaved people from testifying against white people in court. But Ashmore found a workaround. He could present the drawings as physical evidence, and he could testify about what the boy had communicated through gestures and images. The courtroom was packed on the day of the boy's testimony. Spectators came from across the parish, some curious, some supportive, many hostile to the idea of a slave child exposing a white man's crimes. The boy sat in the witness area, not on the stand itself, but at a table beside it. His slate boards and drawings were arranged before him. Ashmore addressed the court. "Your Honor, I present evidence created by this child over a period of weeks. Each drawing documents specific observations of suspicious behavior by the accused." He presented the drawings one by one. Drawing 1, the meeting in Bellefontaine study. 3 men, clearly identifiable. This shows a meeting between Pierre Bellefontaine, Matthias Crane, and an insurance agent named Silas Cooper. The boy witnessed this meeting while performing his duties in the adjacent room. Pritchard objected. The boy cannot testify to what he heard in that meeting. This is hearsay. Judge Fairweather, sustained. Mr. Ashmore, the boy cannot provide testimony about conversations. Ashmore, I'm not asking him to testify about conversations, Your Honor. I'm presenting visual evidence of a meeting that occurred. The meeting itself is not in dispute. Mr. Bellefontaine confirms it happened. Drawing 2, Crane at the sugar press machinery. This shows the accused inspecting equipment in unusual detail, at unusual times, exhibiting behavior that struck the boy as suspicious. Drawing 3, the wagon brake. This shows the accused tampering with a brake mechanism on the wagon that Mr. Bellefontaine later was scheduled to ride. Physical inspection confirmed this brake had been sabotaged. Pritchard objected repeatedly, but each time, Ashmore had a response. The drawings weren't testimony, they were documentation. The boy wasn't speaking, he was showing. Then Ashmore did something unexpected. Your Honor, I'd like the boy to create a new drawing right now, in the court's presence, to demonstrate that these aren't fantasy but accurate observation. Judge Fairweather looked intrigued. Proceed. Ashmore handed the boy a fresh slate and chalk. Draw the defendant, as you see him now. The boy looked at Crane, sitting at the defense table, trying to appear calm but with tension visible in every line of his body. The boy drew quickly, confidently. 10 minutes later, he held up the slate, a detailed portrait of Crane, capturing not just his features but his expression, his posture, the specific details of his clothing. The courtroom murmured. The likeness was remarkable. Ashmore, this demonstrates the boy's observational accuracy. He doesn't draw fantasies, he draws what he sees, in precise detail. Then Ashmore brought Samuel Garrett to the stand. Garrett testified about his own observations, Crane's suspicious behavior, the boy's collapse from deliberate overwork, the conversation with Ashmore that led to the investigation. And you saw the sabotaged brake yourself? Ashmore asked. Yes, sir. After Mr. Ashmore departed, I inspected the wagon. The brake pin had been loosened. 1 more mile of use and it would have failed. Could this have been accidental wear? No, sir. The pin had been deliberately tampered with. Tool marks were visible. Pritchard cross-examined aggressively. You're testifying against your former superior. Isn't this motivated by desire to take his position? No, sir. It's motivated by not wanting to be complicit in murder. The trial lasted 4 days. Both sides presented witnesses, evidence, arguments. Pritchard's best moment came when he put Crane on the stand. Crane testified calmly, reasonably. I inspected equipment regularly. That was my job. The boy followed me sometimes, drew pictures of everything. He's fascinated by machinery. But I never tampered with anything. As for the meetings with the insurance agent, Mr. Bellefontaine asked me to arrange them. I was helping my employer with financial planning. It was a good performance, enough to create reasonable doubt. But Ashmore's closing argument was devastating. Gentlemen of the jury, you've seen remarkable evidence. A child who cannot speak has nevertheless testified through images of extraordinary precision. A young overseer has risked his career to expose wrongdoing. And we have physical evidence, sabotaged equipment, suspicious financial arrangements, attempted arson to destroy witnesses. The defense wants you to believe this is all coincidence, that the boy's drawings are fantasy, that the sabotage break was accidental, that the fire was mischance, that every piece of evidence is explainable away. But consider the pattern. Consider the sequence. Consider that when these enslaved people tried to warn Mr. Bellefontaine, they were punished. When they persisted, they were threatened. When exposure became imminent, attempts were made to kill them. This is not coincidence. This is conspiracy. And the evidence, including the testimony of a child who has no words but whose eyes see truth, is overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with a verdict: guilty of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, guilty of sabotage, not guilty of attempted murder, not enough evidence of direct murder intent, only evidence of creating dangerous conditions. It was a compromise verdict. Crane would serve time but not hang. Crane was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. Webb, as an accomplice, received 8 years. The courtroom erupted in mixed reactions. Some celebrated justice being served. Others protested the verdict being based on slave testimony. The boy sat quietly, watching. He'd exposed the conspiracy. He'd created evidence that couldn't be ignored. But Crane wasn't being fully punished, not for trying to kill Bellefontaine, not for trying to kill the boy himself. Justice, the boy was learning, was partial at best. After the trial, Theodore Ashmore filed his petition for the boy's freedom. The petition argued, the boy had demonstrated exceptional intelligence. He had provided crucial testimony that prevented a murder. He deserved freedom as recognition of his service to justice. Keeping him enslaved served no legitimate purpose. Pierre Bellefontaine opposed the petition. Not out of cruelty, but out of principle. If I free one slave for being intelligent and useful, what message does that send about the others? That they deserve slavery because they're less intelligent. It was a troubling logic, but it reflected Louisiana law's position. Enslaved people could only be freed under very specific circumstances, and being smart wasn't one of them. The judge denied Ashmore's petition. The boy would remain enslaved. But Bellefontaine made concessions. The boy would work in the main house only, no field labor. He would be given proper drawing materials. He would be taught to read and write, illegal, but Bellefontaine would look the other way. He would not be sold or separated from the plantation. It wasn't freedom, but it was survival, and it was acknowledgement. Marcus remained enslaved as well, though Bellefontaine reduced his work hours and improved his living conditions. James, Aunt Bess, and the others returned to their regular assignments with minor improvements. The plantation settled into an uneasy new normal. Everyone knew what had happened, how enslaved people had exposed a murder plot, how a mute child had testified through drawings, how the system had been challenged even if not changed. Theodore Ashmore visited regularly. He brought the boy books about art, anatomy, architecture, anything to develop his visual intelligence. I haven't given up on your freedom, Ashmore told him during one visit. This case is gaining attention. Abolitionists in the North are talking about it. Someday, laws will change. And when they do, you'll be ready. The boy drew in response, a bird in a cage, with the cage door slightly open. Not free yet, but hope visible. Ashmore smiled sadly. Yes, exactly that. Months passed. The story of the mute boy who saw murder spread across Louisiana. Some told it as proof that enslaved people had intelligence and agency. Others told it as warning about giving slaves too much freedom to observe and report. The boy continued drawing. His art evolved, more sophisticated, more emotionally complex. He drew not just what he saw but what he felt, the weight of slavery, the pain of injustice, the hope for freedom. Marcus taught him to write letters. Slowly, painfully, the boy learned to spell words, to write simple sentences. It didn't replace his drawings, Those were still his primary language, but it gave him additional tools for communication. On his 13th birthday, or what people estimated was his 13th birthday, Ashmore gave him a leather-bound journal. "Fill this," Ashmore said, "with drawings, with words, with whatever testimony you want to leave. Someday, people will want to understand what slavery was really like. Your journal could teach them." The boy accepted the journal, ran his hands over the smooth leather. It was the most valuable possession he'd ever owned. That night, he made the first entry, a self-portrait, showing himself holding a piece of chalk, surrounded by drawings. Underneath, he wrote in careful letters, "I cannot speak, but I can see. I am not free, but I am not nothing. My name is—" He paused. He still had no real name. So he gave himself one, choosing carefully, "My name is Witness." It was who he'd become, the boy who saw, who remembered, who testified through silence. Witness. Not free, not safe, not equal, but not invisible either. And in 1858 Louisiana, for an enslaved mute child, that was something. 3 years later, the Civil War began. The Bellefontaine plantation was disrupted like all Louisiana plantations. Some enslaved people fled to Union lines, others stayed out of fear or uncertainty, still others died in the chaos. Theodore Ashmore joined the Union Army as a legal officer, handling documentation and disputes in occupied territories. When Union forces took Baton Rouge, he immediately sought out the Bellefontaine plantation. He found it changed. Bellefontaine had fled south to Confederate territory. The plantation was abandoned, partially burned, occupied by remnant workers who hadn't known where else to go. And he found the boy, now 16, taller but still thin, still mute, still drawing. "You're free now," Ashmore told him. "Federal law. The Emancipation Proclamation. You're no longer property." The boy stared at him, processing words he dreamed of but never quite believed. "Free? Yes. Free. But you need to come with me to Baton Rouge. Get documented. Get protection. The war's not over and freedmen are vulnerable." The boy gathered his few possessions, his slate boards, his journal, now mostly filled with drawings and simple text, the chalk and charcoal he'd hoarded. He left the plantation without looking back. In Baton Rouge, Ashmore enrolled him in a freedmen's school. The boy learned formal reading and writing, learned arithmetic, learned history and geography. But he never learned to speak. The muteness was permanent, whether physical or psychological, no doctor could determine. But it didn't matter anymore. He had other ways to communicate, and people were finally willing to listen. After the war, Ashmore helped him find work as a court illustrator, someone who drew scenes, faces, documentation for legal proceedings. It was perfect, using his observational skills, his artistic ability, his instinct for capturing truth in images. He traveled through Louisiana and Mississippi, documenting Reconstruction trials, civil rights cases, land disputes. His drawings appeared in newspapers, legal documents, historical records. Marcus found him in 1867, in a Baton Rouge courthouse. Marcus had also survived the war, had learned to read and write formally, worked for the Freedmen's Bureau helping formerly enslaved people navigate legal systems. They embraced, 2 survivors, 2 witnesses, 2 men who challenged slavery when challenging it meant death. "You did it," Marcus said. "You got free. You got heard." The boy, now a young man who still called himself Witness, drew a response, 2 figures standing together, tools in hands, looking forward. "Yeah," Marcus said, understanding. "We both did it. Together." They worked together for years. Marcus investigated cases. Witness documented them. They became known in legal circles, the literate freedman and the mute artist, partners in justice. Aunt Bess and James survived too, found each other after the war, lived in Baton Rouge near Witness and Marcus. They formed a community of survivors, of witnesses, of people who'd seen slavery's evil and lived to testify against it. Theodore Ashmore remained witness's advocate and friend until Ashmore's death in 1889. In his will, he left witness his entire law library and enough money to establish a small art studio. Witness lived until 1903, dying at approximately 55 years old. He never married, never had children, never spoke a single word his entire life. But he left thousands of drawings, documentation of slavery, of war, of Reconstruction, of the long struggle for justice. His drawings were preserved in archives, used by historians, studied by artists. One drawing in particular became famous, the original sequence showing Crane's murder conspiracy, the drawings that had exposed evil when words couldn't. They were displayed in a Louisiana museum with a placard, evidence that changed everything, how a mute child's observations exposed murder and challenged slavery's foundations, 1858. Visitors stared at them, marveling at the detail, the accuracy, the intelligence visible in every line. And they asked, what was his name? The boy who drew these. The museum's answer, he was called Thomas, or the Mute, or nothing at all. After the war, he chose the name Witness, because that's what he was, someone who saw truth and found a way to tell it, even without voice. The story of Witness, the mute boy of Louisiana who exposed a murder conspiracy through drawings, raises questions that transcend his individual narrative. Question 1. About voice and testimony. Witness couldn't speak, yet he testified powerfully. His drawings carried more truth than many verbal accounts because they were observed without linguistic bias, documented without verbal distortion. This forces us to ask, how many other voices have we ignored because they didn't speak in the ways we expected? How much testimony has been dismissed because it came from people the system deemed voiceless, not just mute people, but enslaved people, children, women, immigrants, anyone outside power's recognition? The legal system required verbal testimony, but Witness proved that testimony takes many forms: visual, gestural, observational. Truth doesn't require speech if we are willing to see it. Question 2. About believing the unbelievable. For weeks, Witness's drawings were dismissed as fantasy. When Marcus tried to warn people, he was punished. When Garrett saw evidence, he hesitated to believe it. Why? Because the truth was uncomfortable. Because accepting that an enslaved child could observe and document a murder conspiracy meant accepting that enslaved people had intelligence, agency, and value beyond their labor. This happens constantly. Uncomfortable truths are dismissed as fantasy, impossible, exaggerated. We see it in historical accounts of slavery. How bad could it really have been? In testimonies of abuse, surely you're misremembering. In warnings about injustice, you're being paranoid. Witness's story asks, what truths are we dismissing right now because believing them would require us to change? Question 3. About partial justice. Crane was convicted of fraud and sabotage, but not attempted murder. He served 15 years, not life or death. The verdict acknowledged wrongdoing but minimized its severity. Meanwhile, Witness remained enslaved. Marcus remained enslaved. The people who'd exposed the crime, who'd risked their lives for justice, received no freedom, no compensation, no meaningful reward. This is how justice often works: partial, compromised, weighted toward maintaining existing power structures even while appearing to correct specific wrongs. The question remains, is partial justice better than none? Or does partial justice actually reinforce injustice by creating the appearance of fairness while changing nothing fundamental? Question 4. About intelligence and freedom. Ashmore argued Witness deserved freedom because he was exceptionally intelligent. But this logic has a dark corollary. If freedom is deserved because of intelligence, does that mean others deserve enslavement because they're less intelligent? This question plagued even abolitionists. Some argued enslaved people deserved freedom because they were just as intelligent as white people. Others argued they deserved freedom regardless of intelligence, because freedom is a human right, not a reward for cognitive performance. Witness's intelligence made him visible, but it also made him an exception. The system could acknowledge his worth without acknowledging the worth of every enslaved person. True justice would have freed everyone, not just the remarkably observant mute child. Question 5. About memory and history. Witness's real name is lost. We don't know when he was born, who his mother was, whether he had siblings, what his actual voice would have sounded like if he could have spoken. We remember his drawings, his testimony, his impact on a murder trial. But we've forgotten him as a complete person. This is how history treats the powerless. We remember their utility, their moments of extraordinary action, but we lose their ordinary humanity. We know Frederick Douglass's speeches but not the names of most enslaved people. We know Harriet Tubman's rescues but not the lives of those who never escaped. Witness chose his own name after the war, Witness, because that's what history would remember. He knew his personhood would be reduced to his function. Is this acceptable? Should we celebrate that he's remembered at all? Or should we mourn that he's remembered only for what he provided to others, never for who he was to himself? Question 6. About complicity and gratitude. Pierre Bellefontain's life was saved by enslaved people. His response was to improve their condition slightly but keep them enslaved. He was grateful but not grateful enough to grant freedom. He acknowledged debt but not enough to question the system that created it. This is the paradox of slavery. Enslavers depended utterly on enslaved people, for labor, for survival, for the very wealth that defined them, but could never fully acknowledge that dependence without questioning their right to enslave. Bellefontaine owed Witness and Marcus his life. But in his mind, they owed him their lives by default of being his property. So they were even. No debt truly existed. How do we judge this? Is Bellefontaine evil for maintaining slavery despite being saved by enslaved people? Or is he just a product of his time, doing slightly better than most? And if he's just a product of his time, what does that say about systems that normalize evil? Question 7. About art as resistance. Witness's drawings were many things: evidence, testimony, communication, documentation. But they were also art. Beauty created within oppression. Intelligence expressed despite systematic efforts to deny intelligence existed. Enslaved people created art constantly: songs, stories, quilts, carvings, gardens. They did this not because they had leisure time or because masters encouraged it, but because human beings create. The impulse to make meaning, to express beauty, to document truth, these impulses survive even under conditions designed to crush them. Witness's art became evidence, but it started as something else: his way of understanding the world, of making sense of chaos, of asserting his humanity when everything around him denied it. This raises questions about art's purpose. Is art most valuable when it serves practical purposes, solving crimes, exposing injustice? Or is art valuable simply because it exists, because it represents human consciousness expressing itself? Witness's drawings saved lives. But even if they hadn't, even if no one had ever seen them, they would still have mattered. Because he created them. Because he existed as more than property, as more than a mute child, as an artist observing his world. The larger pattern. Witness's story is one story among millions. Enslaved people constantly observed, remembered, documented, and resisted in countless small and large ways. Most of these stories are lost, no drawings preserved, no trials documented, no names remembered. We know about Witness because his drawings happened to expose a white man's crime, which made his observations useful to white legal systems. But countless other enslaved people saw things, knew things, and created things that were ignored or destroyed because they threatened no white person, solved no white person's problem, served no white person's interest. This is the filter through which history reaches us. We remember enslaved people who were useful, who fit narratives of exceptional intelligence or heroic resistance. We forget the majority who survived day to day, who resisted in small ways, who maintained their humanity without leaving evidence that white record keepers considered worth preserving. Witness's journal survived because Theodore Ashmore preserved it. But how many journals were destroyed? How many drawings were burned? How many voices were silenced not just by muteness but by systematic erasure? What would justice have looked like? If true justice had been served in 1858, what would it have looked like? Immediate freedom for Witness, Marcus, and all enslaved people on Bellefontaine Plantation. Financial compensation for years of stolen labor. Legal prosecution not just of Crane but of the entire system of slavery. Education, land ownership, political rights, full citizenship. Public acknowledgement of the intelligence, humanity, and contributions of enslaved people. Institutional change, laws reformed, power redistributed, social hierarchies dismantled. None of this happened. Couldn't happen in 1858 Louisiana. The system wasn't designed to permit it. So Witness got survival, got acknowledgement, got slightly better conditions. And historians later called this a positive outcome, as if being recognized as intelligent while remaining enslaved was success. This is how injustice persists, by making small concessions look like victories, by celebrating the exceptional while ignoring the systemic, by remembering the few who were heard while forgetting the millions who weren't. Modern parallels. Witness's story resonates today because similar dynamics persist. People deemed voiceless who actually have much to say, if we'd listen in ways beyond verbal speech. Evidence dismissed because it comes from sources the system devalues. Exceptional individuals celebrated while systemic injustice remains unchanged. Partial justice presented as complete justice. Useful testimony preserved while ordinary humanity is forgotten. When we tell Witness's story, what are we really doing? Are we celebrating his intelligence and courage? Or are we congratulating ourselves for eventually, partially, reluctantly hearing one enslaved child while ignoring millions of others? Are we learning from his story that all voices matter? Or are we learning that some voices matter when they're useful, while others can be safely ignored? The question we should ask. The story of the mute boy of Louisiana who exposed a murder conspiracy is remarkable. But perhaps the more important question isn't this story amazing? But rather, how many stories like this are we failing to see right now? Who are the modern witnesses? People observing injustice, documenting truth, trying to communicate in ways we are not listening to because they don't speak in the language power recognizes. What evidence are we dismissing as fantasy, because acknowledging it would require us to confront uncomfortable truths about systems we benefit from? What partial justice are we celebrating while ignoring the fundamental injustices that remain unchanged? The final drawing. Witness lived until 1903, dying at approximately 55 years old. His last drawing, found in his studio after his death, showed a single image. A boy standing in a field, holding a piece of chalk. Around him, buildings burned, people ran, chaos unfolded. But the boy stood still, drawing. Underneath, in Witness's careful handwriting. They said I saw nothing because I spoke nothing. But I saw everything. I always saw everything. That drawing hangs in the Louisiana State Museum, in the section on slavery and Reconstruction. Tourists pass it, pause, read the caption, move on. Most never wonder, what was his real name? What did his voice sound like in his own head, in his dreams? What did he draw that wasn't preserved? What did he think about as he died? We know him as Witness. We remember his usefulness. But we've forgotten his humanity. And perhaps that's the real crime. Not that he was enslaved, not that he was ignored, not even that justice was partial. The real crime is that more than a century later, we are still more interested in what enslaved people can teach us about history than in who they were as human beings. Witness saw everything. But do we really see him? Or do we only see what he can do for our understanding, our education, our moral lessons? The boy who couldn't speak left us a question we still haven't answered. When we say someone is voiceless, do we mean they cannot speak? Or do we mean we are not listening? Historical note. This story is a fictionalized account set in the historically accurate context of Louisiana slavery in 1858. While Witness is not a documented historical figure, his story represents the lived experiences of countless enslaved people whose intelligence, agency, and resistance have been systematically erased from historical record. Court cases did occasionally involve enslaved people's observations as evidence, though always filtered through white testimony since enslaved people legally could not testify against white people in Southern courts. Murder conspiracies like the one described did occur, often involving insurance fraud, and enslaved people did find ways to document, communicate, and resist despite systematic efforts to deny them voice and agency. The questions raised by this story, about voice, testimony, justice, memory, and humanity, remain urgent today. How we remember the past shapes how we see the present, and who we choose to remember determines what futures we can imagine. Witness may be fictional, but the truths his story illuminates are real. We are still learning to listen. We are still learning to see.